I understand perfectly. In the previous program, there was also something left for me. You talked about the ether. What is the ether? You just mentioned the etheric part.
Yes.
What is that? How do you define it, and why is it important?
The ether, it is, in traditional Chinese medicine, it's called qi, or the fundamental energy with which we live, speak, eat. It's what makes us move, what keeps us alive. And there is a German scientist who emigrated to the United States, whose name is Wilhelm Reich. He died. He was already a disciple of Freud, and Wilhelm Reich discovered how to manipulate the ether to be able to generate rain, for example, and he developed a machine called the Cloudbuster, which is a machine to create clouds and to destroy clouds. That is, to create rain and to make the rain disappear. Also in the 1950s, and he was arrested by the FBI, and all his material was confiscated, and that man was detained, and, well, they left him a bit in misery. Why do I mention this? Because he called the ether by another name, orgone, which is also a concept that will sound familiar to many listeners. Orgone is the same thing, it's the ether, but called that by Wilhelm Reich. So, he learned to manipulate that energy to benefit from it. For example, that same energy. In previous civilizations, it was used to create physical regeneration chambers. People who have found themselves, and I'm talking about very ancient civilizations, people who have found themselves in poor physical condition, they enter a chamber that is made of stone. And in archaeology, these chambers are called dolmens, right? Actually, they're quantum regeneration chambers, where they use technologies involving the position of the sun, the moon, the stars, in other words, choosing the right moment to regenerate the whole body through the etheric body. In Kabbalah, it is taught that illness comes from the neshama, that is, from one of the highest levels. But in reality, illness or the process of becoming ill can come from an emotional layer, closer to the physical, the etheric. And by treating each symptom in each of the layers it corresponds to, that's where we can succeed in rectifying that diseased process or illness, or actually that process of the soul's learning.
I understand. So the ether, to sum it up, would be like the energy of life.
That's qi. It's called qi in Chinese medicine.
Who has taken over God in the modern world? I don't know if this is your opinion or if you agree with what I'm about to say, that human beings are, in this era, increasingly distant from the spiritual plane, and that this has clear purposes for human beings to operate more in the material world, in a material world controlled by what you called the real beings. I call them satanic Illuminati. I'm done elaborating. What's your opinion regarding the statement I just made? And above all, what kind of intention could they have to separate a culture and a civilization so deeply rooted in Europe, specifically in Christianity? What could be the reason for putting so much will, so much effort, so much money, and so much expense into distancing us from spirituality, traditional European spirituality?
It's simple. They want to make you afraid. With emunah, strong faith in God, you're unafraid and can't be manipulated.
That's true.
And you can't be manipulated.
Right? So you lie.
Of course. What happens is that evil forces try to distance you from God and make him seem non-existent, to make it seem like only material and immediate things matter. To make it seem like there are constant and ongoing emergency situations, invented and provoked on purpose to keep you in survival mode while you're in survival mode. We're in what's called the carnival, and the carnival doesn't stop, and while you're in the carnival, you're not anywhere else. The problem is that there's one carnival after another continuously, and that keeps people from reflecting, from locking themselves in their own chamber. As the Gospels say, when you want to pray to the Father, lock yourself in your chamber, and there you will find the Father, because the Father dwells within you. What does that mean? Does it mean we need time for our spiritual routines? People don't find that time because they are distracted, and I say they are distracted not by themselves, but they are being distracted, so they don't find it, and if they don't find it, they don't connect, and if they don't connect, they are easy to manipulate. In other words, the goal is manipulation, because remember that manipulation is for the survival of the forces of evil. The forces of evil wouldn't make sense if they didn't do their job well, and it's clear that they do it very well, so they still make sense. A wise man, once they asked a wise teacher when the pandemic would end. The wise man said, when we no longer need it. As a spiritual lesson, the wise man says, once humanity no longer needs this lesson, a new one will appear.
I understand. At the end of the day, I also wanted to ask you, why does a non-believer, a non-spiritual person, someone very rooted in the material world, usually use this argument to discredit the existence of God? And it's, if God exists, if, as you call it, the source exists, if the vital energy that connects everything exists, everyone can call it whatever they want. Why does he allow suffering? Why is pain necessary? Why in this world? Why does God allow war? Why does God allow hunger? Why does God allow poverty? Why does God allow a child to have cancer?
I'll start with the last point. A child having cancer relates to their cycle of reincarnations and the tikkun their soul needs to rectify. For example, there are times when a soul finishes its cycle of reincarnations and only needs to incarnate. Let's say 3 to 4 months to experience life and depart this world. Because let's say that's the amount of learning he had left, not only for himself but also for the parents, for the family environment. In other words, the lessons are interconnected with everyone who interacts, for example, with this child you told me about. Why does he allow suffering? It's not that he allows suffering, it's that in this game, everything is allowed. Within the range between good and in evil, there is suffering. What happens is that in the end, evil is not really evil, but it can become good. If you take that suffering and produce a result from it that helps you transform and grow spiritually. And actually, as it is written, it's where your problems are. Most people try to run away from their problems and don't want anything to do with them. What the mystical spiritual sources are teaching you is that if you have a problem or you have a challenge or you have an obstacle, don't run away from it. God is there to teach you a lesson, to connect with you. Pay attention, accept, learn, be grateful, and decide. A wise man was once asked, "How do you have such good health at 120 years old? What do you take to have such good health?" And the wise man replied, "Decisions." And that means that making decisions will take you very far in your life. Some won't be pleasant, some won't be liked, but we didn't come here to please others, we came here to please ourselves. Ourselves consistently. And those things that are not acceptable in your life, you have to look at yourself. And those things that hurt you, you have to look at yourself. You can learn only to a certain point, then you must face and accept pain and suffering. Why does God allow suffering? Well, because it is also written in the Talmud that God helps you even if you want to do evil. That's why I'm explaining this to you, because it's within the frequency range of this world. It's part of the game, but if you want to do good, He allows you to do everything as well. You have free will, which is the great gift that humans have now, having used free will. Brace yourself and accept the consequences of your actions, because there will be unexpected turns. Every action has consequences. If you do wrong, you will receive wrong. Maybe not in this life, but in the next one. If you do good, you'll receive good in this life. It's written that good comes to you sooner than bad. That's another rule of this game. In other words, the acts of kindness you do will come back to you much sooner than acts of evil. Acts of evil will give you the appearance that everything is fine, that everything is fine, and that everything is fine. In your next life, you'll return and suffer. But let's discuss what's unwritten, and you'll wonder why. And for the better, are you a child who has cancer?